Imagine Frankfurt, Germany, in the middle of the 18th century. For the city's Jewish community, life was confined to a single, overcrowded street, the Judengasse, or Jews' Lane. This narrow, gloomy ghetto was a world of its own, locked at night and on Sundays. And it was here, amidst the hardship and the constant struggle, that one of the world's greatest financial dynasties would begin. Our story starts with a young boy named Meyer Amschel Rothschild. Born in 1744, his early life was marked by tragedy. Both of his parents died in a smallpox epidemic when he was just 12, leaving him an orphan. Before his father passed, he had started teaching Meyer the basics of trade, especially dealing in old coins. This small seed of knowledge would become Meyer's lifeline. With no family to support him, the young orphan was sent to Hanover to apprentice with the respected Oppenheim banking firm. This was his university. He wasn't just learning about finance. He was learning about the world of the rich and powerful. He immersed himself in the study of rare coins, metals, and antiquities. He realized these weren't just pieces of metal. They were keys. Keys that could unlock doors to the palaces of princes and aristocrats, who were avid collectors. Returning to Frankfurt, Meyer Amschel put his knowledge to work. He started a small business trading in these rare items. He was meticulous, honest, and had an incredible eye for value. He compiled catalogs of his finest pieces and sent them to wealthy patrons. His reputation began to grow. He wasn't just a dealer, he was a trusted connoisseur. Soon, he caught the attention of Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse, one of the wealthiest men in Europe. Meyer became his court factor, a trusted agent who handled his financial affairs and, crucially, his passion for collecting rare coins. This relationship was the cornerstone upon which the House of Rothschild would be built. Meyer wasn't just making money. He was building connections, trust, and influence. But Meyer knew that personal success was fleeting. True, lasting power came from family. In 1770, he married Ghetto Schnapper, a bright and capable woman from the ghetto. Their marriage was a partnership in every sense of the word. Ghetto managed the home and the business accounts, while Meyer traveled, forging new connections. She was the anchor that allowed him to sail into uncharted waters. Together, they had 10 children, 5 of whom were sons: Amschel, Salomon, Nessan, Karl, and James. From their earliest days, Meyer instilled in them a powerful, unshakable belief. He would gather them around and repeat his core philosophy: unity is strength, never quarrel. He saw his 5 sons, not just his children, but as 5 arrows, each strong on its own, but unbreakable when bundled together. This was his grand vision, a unified, family-run enterprise that would transcend the borders of the Frankfurt ghetto, and even the borders of nations. This wasn't just a dream, it was a strategy. While other businesses relied on outside partners, Meyer trusted only his blood. As his sons grew, he trained them relentlessly in the art of finance. He taught them everything he knew about coins, currencies, bonds, and most importantly, about people. He knew that their shared loyalty would be their greatest asset, an advantage no competitor could match. The family began to take its first major financial risks. Meyer was no longer just a coin dealer. He was arranging loans, managing investments, and navigating the complex currents of European finance. He was innovative, often finding creative ways to move money and information faster than anyone else. In a world without email or telephones, the Rothschilds built their own private courier network, giving them a critical edge. But as the 18th century drew to a close, the ground beneath Europe began to shake. The French Revolution sent shockwaves across the continent, toppling old powers and creating new opportunities. War was brewing, and with war came immense financial risk, but also immense potential for profit. The old world was dying, and a new one was being born in chaos and conflict. Many saw this upheaval as a threat. Meyer Amschel Rothschild saw it as the ultimate test of his vision. The confines of the Judengasse were too small for his ambition, and Frankfurt was too small for his 5 sons. He wasn't just preparing them to run a business, he was preparing them to build an empire. He gathered his sons, the 5 arrows he had so carefully crafted. He assigned to each a role, a destiny. Amschel, the eldest, would stay in Frankfurt to anchor the home base. Salomon would go to Vienna, the heart of the Habsburg Empire. Nathan, the most brilliant and aggressive, was sent to the financial powerhouse of London. Karl would head to Naples, and the youngest, James, would conquer Paris. From their cramped house on Jews Lane, Meyer was orchestrating a continental takeover. He was sending his sons out not just as bankers, but as his eyes and ears, 5 extensions of his own will. Their mission was to establish branches of the family firm in the most important capitals of Europe. They would share information, coordinate their actions, and operate as a single, unified force. The family's motto would become Concordia, Integritas, Industria Harmony, Integrity, Industry. This was the dawn of a new era. The story of Meyer Amschel Rothschild is not just about money. It's about a father's ambition, the unbreakable bond of family, and a vision that transformed a small-time coin dealer from a Frankfurt ghetto into the patriarch of a global financial dynasty. He prepared his sons for a future far beyond anything he could have imagined, laying the groundwork for a legacy that would shape the course of history. The turn of the 19th century. In a cramped house in the Frankfurt ghetto, an old man named Meyer Amschel Rothschild gathers his 5 sons. He holds up 5 arrows, bound together. Individually, he tells them, an arrow can be easily broken, but together, they are unbreakable. This wasn't just a lesson. It was a battle plan, a strategy that would change the face of global finance forever. This is the story of how 5 brothers, armed with nothing but ambition and a powerful family bond, conquered Europe. Meyer's vision was audacious. He would send his sons out like arrows from a bow, each aimed at a major European capital. His eldest, Amschel, would remain in Frankfurt, anchoring the family's home base. The second son, Salomon, was dispatched to the heart of the Habsburg Empire, Vienna. The third, and most daring, Nathan, set his sights on the world's financial center, London. The fourth, Karl, was sent to the sun-drenched but politically treacherous courts of Naples in Italy. And the youngest, James, just a teenager, was tasked with conquering the most glamorous and dangerous city of all, Paris. Their mission was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in practice. They were to establish branches of the family bank, creating a network that spanned the continent. But think about the world they were entering. This was an era before telephones, before the internet, even before reliable train travel. A letter from London to Vienna could take weeks, carried by a horse-drawn coach over muddy bandit-infested roads. And the brothers weren't just battling distance. They were battling deep-seated prejudice. As Jews, they faced a labyrinth of anti-Semitic laws and social barriers. In most cities, they were forbidden from owning property, restricted in their trade, and barred from the aristocratic circles they needed to influence. They were outsiders, trying to break into the most exclusive clubs in the world. Each brother faced his own unique set of challenges. In London, Nathan Rothschild quickly realized that in finance, information is more valuable than gold. While his competitors waited for official news to travel by sea, Nathan built his own private network of couriers. His agents, on fast horses and swift ships, crisscrossed Europe, carrying market data, political news, and secret intelligence. Nathan's messages were often written in a private code, a mix of Yiddish and Hebrew, making them unreadable to prying eyes. This information advantage allowed him to make moves on the stock exchange hours, sometimes days, before anyone else. He wasn't just trading, he was pioneering high-speed communication, creating the 19th century equivalent of a fiber optic cable. He bought and sold government bonds, funded trade, and quickly became a dominant force on the London Stock Exchange, earning a reputation for being both brilliant and utterly ruthless. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Salomon had a different mountain to climb. The Habsburg court was a fortress of ancient aristocracy, stiff with protocol and suspicion of newcomers. Salomon couldn't just rely on financial genius. He needed charm, diplomacy, and infinite patience. He slowly and methodically cultivated relationships with Austrian princes and ministers. He offered them favorable loans and discreet financial advice, making himself indispensable. He learned to navigate the complex social etiquette, hosting lavish parties and becoming a patron of the arts. He wasn't just a banker, he was a master networker, gradually dissolving the walls of prejudice, not with a hammer, but with a handshake and a well-placed loan. Don in Italy, Carlo faced a fragmented and politically volatile landscape. The Italian states were constantly shifting alliances, and their finances were a mess. Carl's job was less about high-flying market trades and more about careful, painstaking negotiation. He became a specialist in government debt, helping to stabilize the finances of kingdoms like Naples. He had to be a diplomat, an economist, and a risk assessor all in one, lending money to rulers who might be overthrown the next month. His success depended on his ability to judge character and political stability, a tightrope walk where one misstep could mean financial ruin. And then there was James, the youngest, in Paris. At the center of Napoleon's new empire, Paris was the capital of style, power, and revolutionary fervor. For a young Jewish man from the Frankfurt Ghetto, it was like landing on another planet. The French aristocracy, a mix of old money and Napoleon's new elite, looked down on him as a provincial upstart. But James possessed a fiery ambition that matched his older brothers. He used his youth and charisma to his advantage, charming his way into salons and ballrooms. He learned to dress like a Parisian, talk like a Parisian, and, most importantly, think one step ahead of the Parisian bankers who saw him as a rival. He proved that a Rothschild could be as sophisticated and cunning as any French aristocrat, laying the groundwork for a financial dynasty in the heart of Napoleon's empire. As the brothers built their individual outposts, they never forgot their father's lesson. They were 5 arrows, but they were bound together. Their secret weapon was their constant communication. Every day, couriers raced between London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, carrying letters filled with coded market data, political gossip, and family news. This was their private internet. They shared everything: profits, losses, opportunities, and threats. If Carl needed capital for a loan in Naples, Nathan could raise it in London. If James heard a rumor in Paris about troop movements, Salomon would know about it in Vienna within days. They operated as a single, coordinated entity with 5 heads, a multinational corporation before the term even existed. They could move capital across borders faster than governments, sidestepping local crises and capitalizing on international opportunities. While their rivals saw Europe as a collection of separate markets, the Rothschilds saw it as a single, interconnected chessboard. But their rise was set against the backdrop of a continent on fire. Napoleon Bonaparte was on the march, and his ambition was plunging Europe into a seemingly endless series of wars. Economic storms raged as armies moved, borders shifted, and trade routes were blockaded. For the Rothschilds, this chaos was both a grave danger and a monumental opportunity. War is expensive, and governments across the continent desperately needed money to fund their armies. The brothers found themselves in the unique position of being able to lend to both sides of the conflict, a dangerous but incredibly profitable game. As the first decade of the 19th century drew to a close, their network was humming. They were no longer just the sons of a Frankfurt merchant. They were powers in their own right, whispering in the ears of ministers and kings. But their private courier network, the very system that gave them their edge, brought them a chilling piece of intelligence. The dispatches from Paris, Vienna, and London all carried the same message, a dark premonition of what was to come. Napoleon was preparing for his greatest campaign yet. The tremors of small conflicts were about to erupt into a continental earthquake. The greatest war Europe had ever seen was on the horizon, and the 5 brothers found themselves standing directly in its path. Imagine a continent engulfed in war. Europe, from 1810 to 1815, is a battlefield. Armies march, empires clash, and the old world order is crumbling under the weight of Napoleon Bonaparte's ambition. In this era of unprecedented chaos, traditional banking systems are collapsing, trade routes are severed, currencies are unstable, and financing a war, let alone a business, seems impossible. Yet, in the heart of this turmoil, one family saw not just risk, but an extraordinary opportunity. This is the story of how the Rothschilds, led by the brilliant Nathan Meyer Rothschild, navigated the treacherous waters of the Napoleonic Wars, building an empire on courage, risk, and the fastest intelligence network the world had ever seen. Our story begins in London, where Nathan Rothschild, one of 5 brothers strategically placed in Europe's financial capitals, watches the continent burn. While other bankers are paralyzed by fear, Nathan sees a path through the flames. The British government is desperate. They need to pay their troops, especially the army led by the Duke of Wellington, who is fighting a brutal campaign against the French in Portugal and Spain. But how do you get money to a war zone when enemy ships and privateers patrol the seas? Direct bank transfers are impossible. Shipping gold is a suicide mission. This is where Nathan's genius truly ignites. He devises a series of audacious, almost unbelievable strategies. He begins by buying up bullion, vast quantities of gold and silver, from the East India Company. But he doesn't just ship it. Instead, he uses his family's network. His brother James in Paris, despite being in the heart of enemy territory, helps him acquire French currency. Nathan then uses this to buy financial notes, or IOUs, from Wellington's brother-in-law. These notes are then smuggled across the English Channel, through France, over the Pyrenees Mountains, and finally to Wellington in Portugal. It was a complex, high-stakes relay race of money and information, operating right under Napoleon's nose. Every step of this process was fraught with peril. Smugglers carrying the gold and notes had to evade French patrols, navigate treacherous mountain passes, and brave the open sea. Ships carrying bullion were constant targets. A single capture could mean financial ruin and even death. But Nathan's network was built for this. His couriers were the best in the business. His agents were everywhere, and his information was second to none. He knew which routes were safe, which officials could be bribed, and where the enemy would be before they even moved. This wasn't just banking, it was financial warfare. The family's intelligence network became a thing of legend. While governments relied on slow, official dispatches that could take weeks to arrive, the Rothschilds had their own private courier service. Their riders, on the fastest horses, crisscrossed Europe, carrying coded messages tucked into their clothes, their boots, even their food. They used carrier pigeons and semaphore signals. They had agents in every major port, every financial center, and every political court. They knew the outcomes of battles, the movements of armies, and the signing of treaties often days before kings and prime ministers. This information was more valuable than gold. And this brings us to the climax of the Napoleonic Wars. Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. The fate of Europe hung in the balance. As Wellington's forces clashed with Napoleon's army on a muddy field in Belgium, the London Stock Exchange was in a state of panic. Rumors flew. Had Napoleon won? Had Wellington been defeated? The market was volatile, and fortunes were waiting to be made or lost in an instant. Here, the legend of Nathan Rothschild is cemented. Thanks to his unparalleled intelligence network, a Rothschild courier named Rothworth witnessed the battle's end. He spurred his horse to the coast, chartered a boat despite a raging storm in the Channel, and delivered the news of Napoleon's defeat directly to Nathan in London. He arrived a full 24 hours before the government's own official messenger. What Nathan did next has been debated for centuries. The popular legend says he went to the stock exchange and started selling his British government bonds, or consols. Everyone, seeing the great Rothschilds selling, assumed he had news that Wellington had lost. A wave of panic selling crashed the market. Then, just as prices hit rock bottom, Nathan's agents quietly bought up everything they could. When the official news of victory finally arrived, the market soared, and Nathan's fortune multiplied exponentially. While the dramatic details of him personally manipulating the market are likely exaggerated, the core truth remains. Nathan knew the result of Waterloo before anyone else, and he used that information to his advantage. He had gambled on a British victory, and his foresight paid off on a scale never seen before. It was the ultimate demonstration of how superior information, combined with immense courage, could conquer financial markets, even amidst the chaos of war. But profiting from war carries a heavy moral weight. The Rothschilds were not arms dealers. They were financiers. They provided the lifeblood that allowed the British Army to fight and ultimately win. Without their gold, Wellington's soldiers would not have been paid, fed, or supplied. Their campaign might have collapsed, and the history of Europe could have been very different. Yet, the fact remains that their fortune was built upon the continent's deadliest conflict. It's a complex legacy, financing peace through the machinery of war. When the smoke finally cleared and peace returned to Europe, the continent was changed forever. And so was the Rothschild family. The five brothers, once modest merchants, now stood as giants of international finance. Their wealth was immense, but more importantly, so was their influence. They had proven that in an age of uncertainty, information was the ultimate currency, and courage was the greatest asset. They had financed a war, reshaped a continent's financial landscape, and built a dynasty that would influence world affairs for generations to come. Their story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, fortune favors the bold. When the smoke cleared from the Napoleonic Wars in 1815, Europe was a continent in ruins, desperate for cash to rebuild. And who was there, ready to finance the future? The five Rothschild brothers. This wasn't just about making money. It was about building empires, not of land, but of finance and industry. The post-war period was chaotic. Governments from Austria to Prussia were on the brink of bankruptcy. This was the Rothschilds' moment, led by Nathan in London. They pioneered a revolutionary financial instrument, the government bond. Instead of lending directly to a single monarch, they sold these bonds to the public, spreading the risk and raising unprecedented sums of money. They essentially created the international bond market as we know it. This wasn't just a loan, it was a vote of confidence in the stability of post-war Europe, a confidence underwritten by the Rothschild name. They issued massive loans to Austria, Prussia, and even the restored French monarchy. Their network of brothers, communicating with incredible speed via couriers, gave them an information advantage no one could match. They knew which governments were stable and which were risky, allowing them to make bets that consistently paid off. But this success didn't go unnoticed. Rival banking houses and old aristocratic families viewed these upstarts with a mixture of awe and suspicion. How could these five brothers from the Frankfurt Ghetto hold the finances of Europe in their hands? As the 1820s rolled on, a new sound began to echo across the continent: the chugging of the steam locomotive. The Industrial Revolution was gathering speed, and the Rothschilds were at its very heart. They saw that the future wasn't just in government debt, but in the iron and steel that would connect the continent. James, based in Paris, became a driving force behind the birth of continental railways. He understood that railways were more than just transport. They were arteries of commerce that would fuel industrial growth for decades. Financing a railway was a monumental undertaking, far too large for any single investor. So, the brothers applied their bond market genius to industry. They created railway companies, issued shares, and sold them to a public hungry for new investment opportunities. They financed the first major lines in France, Belgium, and Austria, literally laying the tracks for a modern, interconnected Europe. Their involvement wasn't just financial. They were hands-on, dealing with engineers, navigating complex land rights, and persuading skeptical politicians. They were building the infrastructure of the 19th century. While they were financing kings and building railways, the brothers had to become masters of politics. Each brother cultivated relationships in the highest circles of power. Salomon in Vienna became a close confidant of Prince Metternich, the architect of post-Napoleonic Europe. James in Paris moved gracefully through the royal court, while Nathan in London was a power broker in the city. They were not just bankers. They were advisors, diplomats, and intelligence gatherers. They provided stability in a volatile world, often acting as a bridge between rival nations. When France and Austria were on the brink of conflict over Italy, it was the Rothschilds, with financial interest in both nations, who worked behind the scenes to de-escalate tensions and preserve peace, because for them war was bad for business. But their unparalleled success came at a cost. Their rise to prominence sparked envy and resentment. The old European aristocracy couldn't stomach the idea of being indebted to Jewish bankers. This fueled a surge in anti-Jewish sentiment, and the press became a battlefield. Vicious caricatures and hostile articles portrayed the Rothschilds as shadowy puppeteers, a conspiracy controlling the world from behind the scenes. This was a painful, public assault on their identity and their faith. They were simultaneously building Europe's future while fighting prejudice from its past. Through all this turmoil, the family's anchor remained in Frankfurt. Amschel, the eldest brother, managed the original family bank. He was the moral compass, the quiet center of their sprawling empire. While his brothers chased deals in Europe's glittering capitals, Amschel upheld their father's strict principles of unity, integrity, and discretion. He was the glue that held the five arrows together, constantly reminding them in his letters that their strength lay not in their individual wealth, but in their unwavering solidarity. He was the guardian of the Rothschild legacy. By the early 1830s, the strain of building this financial empire began to show. Nathan, the brilliant and aggressive architect of their London success, found his health failing. Years of relentless work, stress, and navigating the cutthroat world of London finance had taken their toll. He was the engine of the family's early expansion, but the constant pressure was wearing him down. As Nathan's health waned, James in Paris rose to even greater prominence. He had become the most influential banker in France, a friend to kings and a patron of the arts. His lavish parties were the talk of Europe. But beneath the glamour was a shrewd and calculating mind, securing the family's dominance for the next generation. Then, in 1836, a pivotal chapter closed. Rothschild, the family matriarch who had refused to leave the family home in the Frankfurt Ghetto, even as her sons became the richest men in the world, passed away. Her death was a profound moment for the brothers. It was a final, poignant reminder of their humble origins and of the principles their father, Amschel, had instilled in them. Gathering in Frankfurt for the funeral, the five brothers, now middle-aged men at the height of their power, looked at each other. They had changed the world, financed nations, and built industries. Their father was gone. Their mother was gone. But their father's final command echoed stronger than ever remained united. They renewed their vow, promising to continue their work as one, a single entity bound by blood and business. The first generation of the Rothschild Empire was passing, but the dynasty they had built was just beginning. Have you ever wondered what it's like to hold the fate of nations in your hands? To have kings and ministers knocking on your door, desperate for your help? For the Rothschild family, this wasn't a fantasy. It was their reality. But as the 1830s dawned, the golden age of their undisputed dominance was about to face its greatest test. This is the story of how the world's most powerful family navigated a decade of intrigue, rivalry, and revolution. In 1836, the unthinkable happened. Nathan Rothschild, the patriarch of the London branch and the undisputed leader of the family, passed away. He was the financial titan who had famously helped Britain defeat Napoleon. His death sent shockwaves, not just through the family, but across the financial markets of Europe. The pillar of the dynasty was gone. Who could possibly fill his shoes? The weight of the world now fell squarely on the shoulders of his four surviving brothers. Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Caroline Naples, and the youngest, James, in Paris. The wolves were already circling. Seeing a moment of weakness, rival banking houses, like the Pereire brothers in France, saw their chance. They launched aggressive campaigns to break the Rothschilds' grip on state financing. It was a direct assault on their empire, forcing the brothers to coordinate like never before. They had to prove that the Rothschild name was stronger than any single man. James, now the de facto head of the family, had to be more cunning and ruthless than ever to fend off these new competitors. While James battled rivals in the open market, his brother Salomon was playing a much more dangerous game in the heart of the Austrian Empire. Vienna was a web of political plots and secret alliances, presided over by the arch-conservative Chancellor Salomon had to navigate this treacherous environment, using his financial leverage to maintain influence while dodging the daggers of court conspirators. As nationalism began to simmer across the empire, Salomon's position as a Jewish financier in a deeply traditional Catholic court became increasingly precarious. It was a symbol of an old world order that many were beginning to resent. Meanwhile, in London, Nathan's son Lionel stepped up to lead the English branch. He faced his own unique challenges. Imparliament plots were hatched to curb the influence of foreign-born bankers. The Rothschilds were global, but politicians in London, Paris, and Vienna were growing suspicious of this transnational family, whose loyalties seemed to be to each other first, and their host nations second. Were they Englishmen, Frenchmen, and Austrians? Or were they simply Rothschilds? This question would haunt them. The brothers had to use all their diplomatic skill and financial muscle to defuse these political time bombs, knowing that one misstep could bring their whole enterprise crashing down. Then, in 1848, the powder keg exploded. A wave of revolution swept across Europe, starting in Paris and spreading like wildfire to Vienna, Berlin, and beyond. For the Rothschilds, it was a nightmare scenario. Their fortunes were built on stability, on financing established monarchies. Now, those very monarchies were teetering on the brink of collapse. In Paris, King Louis Philippe, with whom James had a tense but profitable relationship, was forced to flee. The streets were filled with angry mobs, and the Rothschild name was being denounced by radicals as a symbol of the old, corrupt regime. James had to think fast, not just to save his fortune, but to save his family. The panic was even worse in Vienna. As riots erupted, the anti-establishment sentiment quickly morphed into violent, anti-Jewish protest. Salomon, the powerful court banker, was suddenly a target. The family's wealth couldn't protect them from the mob. Their primary concerns shifted from protecting their profits to protecting their people. The brothers used their vast network and resources to help Jewish communities, providing funds and organizing safe passage for those in danger. It was a stark reminder that despite all their power and influence, they were still seen as outsiders by many, and their safety was never guaranteed. As the smoke cleared from the springtime of peoples, the brothers gathered, figuratively and through their constant stream of letters, to assess the damage. Their wealth had taken a hit, but they had survived. More importantly, they had a profound realization. The old Europe, the Europe of absolute monarchs and stable courts that had allowed their empire to flourish, was gone forever. A new era of nationalism, popular democracy, and industrial capitalism was dawning. To survive, they would have to adapt. The age of intrigue and court politics was giving way to a new, more unpredictable world. The Rothschilds had weathered the storm, but they knew the challenges ahead would be greater than any they had ever faced. Their fight for survival was far from over. This chapter of the Rothschild saga shows us that even a family with unimaginable power is vulnerable to the tides of history. Their story is a timeless lesson in resilience, adaptation, and the enduring strength of family unity in the face of chaos. The world is on fire. It's 1848. The springtime of peoples and revolutions are sweeping across Europe. Monarchs are toppled, empires tremble, and amidst this chaos, a new generation of a legendary family is about to step onto the world stage. The 5 sons of Meyer Amschel Rothschild had built an empire of finance. Now, their own sons and nephews are inheriting a world teetering on the brink of modernity. This isn't just about passing the torch. It's about navigating a storm of industrial revolution, political upheaval, and global ambition. The second generation was a different breed. Born into immense wealth, they were more refined, more educated, and perhaps more divided. In London, Lionel de Rothschild, Nathan's son, wasn't just a banker. He was a politician fighting for his right to sit in Parliament, a battle that symbolized the broader struggle for Jewish emancipation across Europe. In Paris, his cousin James, the last of the original brothers, was the king of finance. But his sons were more interested in art, wine, and high society than the gritty details of the counting house. The family's focus was shifting. The old model of financing governments through wartime loans was still profitable, but the real money was now in building the modern world. They plunged their capital into the arteries of this new age. Railroads. They financed tracks that crisscrossed France, Austria, and beyond, shrinking distances and creating vast new markets. When a visionary Frenchman, Ferdinand de Lesseps, dreamed of connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, it was Rothschild money that helped make the Suez Canal a reality. This wasn't just a canal. It was a strategic global artery, and they were at its financial heart. Their investments stretched from British mining operations to resource extraction in the Americas, transforming them from European bankers into a truly global financial institution. But they weren't alone. New rivals were emerging, like the Pereire brothers in France, who championed a more aggressive, industrial style of banking, directly challenging the Rothschilds' dominance. This new competition forced the family to adapt, but it also exposed cracks in their own foundation. Internally, the cousins disagreed. Should they embrace the new, riskier ventures of industrial finance, or stick to the safer, more traditional model of government bonds? The London branch, under the pragmatic Lionel, was cautious. The Paris and Vienna branches were often more adventurous. These weren't just business disagreements. They were debates about the very soul of the family empire. As the family navigated these internal and external pressures, the political landscape of Europe was being redrawn by one man, Otto von Bismarck. The Iron Chancellor of Prussia was on a mission to unite Germany, and he didn't trust the international influence of families like the Rothschilds. He saw their cross-border network as a potential threat to his nationalist ambitions. The family's Frankfurt branch, the cradle of their dynasty, found itself caught in the middle of Bismarck's power plays. When Prussia annexed Frankfurt in 1866, it was a symbolic blow, signaling the end of an era. The original Rothschild home was no longer the center of their world. Power was consolidating in London, Paris, and the newly unified Germany under Bismarck's firm hand. Despite these challenges, the family's influence remained immense. They were patrons of the arts, philanthropists who built hospitals and schools, and key figures in the ongoing fight for Jewish civil rights. Lionel's eventual entry into the British Parliament in 1858 was a landmark victory, celebrated by Jewish communities across the continent. They were transforming from financiers into a modern aristocracy, wielding soft power through their wealth, connections, and cultural patronage. But the Gilded Age they presided over was built on fragile foundations. The rivalry between France and Bismarck's Prussia was a powder keg waiting for a spark. In 1870, it exploded. The Franco-Prussian War was a swift, brutal disaster for France. Emperor Napoleon III was captured, the French army was humiliated, and the German Empire was proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. For the Paris Rothschilds, it was a catastrophe. As the Prussian army laid siege to Paris, the city descended into chaos, starvation, and civil war. The Paris Commune rose up, a radical socialist government that saw the Rothschilds as symbols of the capitalist order they sought to destroy. The family fled, their magnificent Parisian mansion. The Hôtel de Talleyrand was occupied, and their world was turned upside down. As the fires of the Commune raged, burning parts of Paris to the ground, it seemed as if the golden era of the second generation was ending in smoke and ashes. The world they had helped build was now violently tearing itself apart, and the family would have to find their place in the turbulent new order that would rise from the flames. We've journeyed with them from a Frankfurt ghetto to the gilded halls of European power. But now, we enter the twilight of the 19th century, a period of unprecedented change and turmoil. From 1870 to 1900, the world the Rothschilds had mastered began to disappear. This is the story of how an empire of credit faced its greatest trials, adapting to survive in a world moving beyond kings. The year is 1870. War clouds gather as Prussia sets its sights on France. In Paris, the streets buzz with patriotic fervor, but soon that fervor will turn to desperation. As Prussian armies encircle the city, Alphonse de Rothschild, head of the Paris branch, faces a nightmare. The city is besieged, cut off from the world. Food becomes scarce. The wealthy flee, and the government teeters on the brink of collapse. For the Rothschilds, whose entire business is built on communication and the free flow of capital, this is a catastrophe. Yet, even in the darkest hours of the siege of Paris, the Rothschild machine keeps turning. Alphonse uses the family's legendary network, smuggling messages out of the city via hot air balloons and carrier pigeons. He negotiates with both the French government and the invading Prussians, trying to broker peace and, more pragmatically, to ensure the massive war indemnity demanded by Prussia can be paid. It's a testament to their influence that even in the midst of war, both sides need the Rothschilds to manage the finances of the conflict. When the dust settles and the Paris Commune rises in a bloody, short-lived revolt, the Rothschild Bank, miraculously, remains standing. It's a powerful symbol. Empires might fall, but the empire of credit endures. While Paris licks its wounds, London is entering its golden age. Across the Channel, the British branch, led by the astute Lionel de Rothschild and his sons, is at the apex of its power. London is the undisputed financial capital of the world, and the Rothschilds are its uncrowned kings. Their biggest coup? The Suez Canal. In 1875, the financially troubled ruler of Egypt puts his shares in the canal up for sale. British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli sees a chance to secure Britain's lifeline to its empire in India, but Parliament is not in session. He can't get the money. In a now-famous exchange, Disraeli sends a messenger to his friend, Lionel de Rothschild. The question is simple. Can you provide £4 million sterling? A colossal sum, almost overnight. The answer comes back just as simply. Yes, without hesitation, without collateral, based on the word of the Prime Minister, the Rothschilds advance the money. Britain secures the Suez Canal, and the Rothschilds cement their status, not just as bankers, but as partners in the destiny of the British Empire. This single act captures the essence of their power speed, immense capital, and unparalleled political connections. But the world is changing faster than ever. The telegraph, the telephone, and the transatlantic cable are shrinking the globe, eroding the information advantage the Rothschilds once held with their couriers and pigeons. New, powerful, joint stock banks and publicly traded companies are rising, challenging the family firm model. These new institutions can pool capital from thousands of investors, reaching a scale that even the Rothschilds find hard to match. The age of personal, relationship-based banking is giving way to a more impersonal, regulated, and corporate financial world. The family has to adapt. They begin to invest heavily in new industries, railways, oil, and mining, from Russia to South Africa. They embrace the new technologies that once threatened them, using the telegraph to coordinate their global operations with lightning speed. They're no longer just financing governments. They are financing the industrial infrastructure of the modern world. But this shift also means they are more visible, more exposed than ever before. And with that visibility comes a darker tide. As the 19th century draws to a close, a new and virulent strain of antisemitism sweeps across Europe. In France, the Dreyfus affair tears the nation apart. In Russia, brutal pogroms terrorize Jewish communities. In this charged atmosphere, the Rothschild name becomes a lightning rod. For some, it's a symbol of Jewish success and philanthropy. For others, it's a target for conspiracy theories and resentment. Pamphlets and cartoons portray them as shadowy puppet masters, a caricature that will haunt their name for the next century. They are simultaneously admired and attacked, a paradox that defines their existence in this new era. This period is also marked by deep personal stories. The family is not an abstract entity. It's made up of individuals navigating love, loss, and the immense weight of their legacy. They build magnificent country estates, like Wadston Manor in England, filling them with priceless art, creating cultural landmarks that stand to this day. But they also face tragedy, the pressures of maintaining unity across a sprawling dynasty, and the constant struggle to find meaning beyond wealth. The central question for the younger generation is no longer how to build an empire, but how to preserve one in a world that is becoming increasingly hostile to the very idea of dynasties and inherited power. As the year 1900 dawns, the world is on the cusp of a new century. The old certainties are gone, monarchies are fading, democracy is on the rise, and the financial landscape has been remade. The Rothschild dynasty has been tested by war, revolution, technological disruption, and social upheaval. They have been forced to change, to evolve, to look beyond Europe and beyond government bonds. They are no longer the secret power behind the thrones, because the thrones themselves are wobbling. Yet, they have survived. The name, the wealth, and the network remain. They enter the 20th century battered and transformed, but unbroken. Their empire of credit has proven to be more resilient than the empires of kings and emperors it once served. The story is far from over. Thank you for watching.